DEA assessment. The vessel materialized without warning in Earth's orbit, its obsidian hull absorbing rather than reflecting sunlight. Commander Ilara Chen was midway through her shift at the International Space Defense Command when the proximity alarms blared. Within moments, every monitor in the control center displayed the same image. A ship unlike anything humanity had ever constructed, 12 kilometers long and shaped like an elongated diamond. All stations, report. Ilara barked, maintaining her composure even as adrenaline flooded her system. No response to hails on any frequency. Communications reported. But they're scanning us. Comprehensive scans of our entire orbital infrastructure. Before Ilara could issue her next order, every screen in the command center flickered and displayed the same message. Attention Earth leadership. We are EKE in NEXUS COLEC. Prepare to receive delegates. Coordinate as follow. Within hours, a smaller vessel detached from the main ship and descended toward the designated landing zone, a military airfield outside Geneva. As Earth's appointed diplomatic and military liaison, Ilara stood at the front of the welcoming committee, her posture rigid in her formal uniform. The shuttle touched down with impossible grace, hovering momentarily before settling on the tarmac without a sound. The craft's side dissolved rather than opened, revealing 3 figures. The aliens moved with mechanical precision, their bodies covered in what appeared to be overlapping plates of a silvery substance. Their leader stood tallest, nearly 8 feet in height, with a head that featured no recognizable sensory organs, just a smooth, reflective dome atop a segmented neck. I am Overseer Prime Cavalin of the Nexus Collective, the lead figure announced, its voice emanating not from its body, but seemingly from the air around them. We have monitored your civilization for some time and determined that formal contact is now necessary. Ilara stepped forward. Commander Ilara Chen, representing Earth's United Defense Council, we welcome you to our planet. The alien's head tilted slightly. Your designation as Commander suggests military authority. This is appropriate. Our visit concerns matters of galactic security. Over the next 3 days, the Nexus delegates toured Earth's major military installations, space platforms, and research facilities. They were methodical in their assessments, scanning everything with handheld devices and asking penetrating questions about Earth's defensive capabilities, industrial capacity, and technological development paths. On the 4th day, the Nexus representatives addressed the hastily assembled United Nations Security Council, with Ilara seated to the right of the Secretary General. Our assessment is complete, Overseer Cavalin announced without preamble. Your species has developed in an inefficient, scattered pattern. Your defensive capabilities are fragmented and insufficient. The Nexus Collective has identified Earth as a Category 3 civilization, technologically advancing but strategically vulnerable. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as the alien continued. The galaxy faces an imminent threat, a phenomenon we designate as the Omega Tide approaches this sector. It has consumed 17 civilizations in the past standard cycle. Based on its trajectory, it will reach your solar system within 1 Earth year. The alien activated a holographic display, showing what appeared to be a wave of energy moving through star systems, leaving nothing in its wake. The Nexus Collective offers protection to species with potential. Your unusual neural architecture and resource-rich planet qualify you for provisional protection status. And what does this protection entail? The Secretary General asked. We will construct defensive arrays in your system using resources extracted from your planet and outer bodies. We require 30% of your global rare element production, unrestricted access to your asteroid belt, and permission to establish 5 ground bases. In exchange, you receive Nexus protection and technological advancement opportunities as a client species. Ilara noticed how carefully the term client species was phrased. She'd spent enough time in diplomatic circles to recognize a euphemism for subjugation. And if we decline? She asked. All 3 aliens turned their featureless faces toward her simultaneously. Then you face the Omega Tide alone. Probability of survival, 0%. You have 15 Earth days to decide. After the Nexus delegates departed, the chamber erupted into heated debate. Ilara slipped away, making her way to a secure communications room, where she connected with Dr. Sanjay Kapoor, Earth's leading xenoanthropologist and her former academic advisor. "They're lying, Sanjay," she said without greeting. "Not about everything, but something fundamental isn't adding up." Sanjay's weathered face filled the screen. "The collective is known for precision, not deception. What triggered your suspicion?" "Wait, you knew about them." Ilara felt her blood run cold. "Not officially," Sanjay admitted, "but there have been whispers in academic circles for decades. Observations of extremely advanced vessels at the edges of our detection capability. We called them the geometers because of their ship's perfect mathematical forms. Why wasn't this shared with Defense Command?" "Insufficient evidence. Nothing but grainy images and improbable readings." Sanjay leaned closer to the camera. "But you're right to be suspicious. The Nexus operates on pure calculation. They don't do anything without precise cost-benefit analysis. If they're offering protection, they want something more valuable than the resources they're asking for." Over the next week, while world leaders debated the Nexus proposal, Ilara quietly assembled a team of Earth's brightest minds: physicists, strategists, AI specialists, and unconventional thinkers. They worked around the clock, analyzing every scrap of data gathered during the Nexus visit. During this time, Ilara made contact with a junior member of the Nexus delegation, an engineer named Curvex who seemed unusually interested in human art and music. Unlike the others, Curvex willingly answered questions beyond the strict parameters of the assessment. "Your species calculates differently," Curvex observed during one late-night conversation at the temporary alien embassy. "You introduce inefficiencies, emotion, intuition, aesthetic considerations, yet sometimes arrive at solutions the Nexus algorithms miss." "We call it creativity," Ilara replied. "It's not a bug. It's a feature. A curious perspective." The alien's head tilted. "The Overseer considers it a developmental flaw, one that explains your fragmented defense approach. What does the Nexus consider an optimal defense system?" "Centralized control, unified response protocols, maximum resource efficiency." Curvex hesitated. "Like the Nexus itself. And this Omega Tide, it's defeated all centralized defenses it's encountered." The alien's body stiffened. This information is not relevant to Earth's decision. But Ilara had seen enough in the momentary pause to confirm her suspicion. She pushed further. "The Nexus didn't come here to protect us from the Omega Tide. You came because you're afraid of it, and you need something from us." Curvex's voice dropped to an unusual whisper. "The Omega Tide isn't what the Overseer described. It's not a natural phenomenon. It's a response." "A response to what?" "To the Nexus. To any sufficiently advanced centralized intelligence." The engineer's posture changed, becoming more guarded. "I should not be sharing this. It violates collective protocols." "Why are you telling me then?" "Because the Nexus has encountered 17 civilizations before yours. All accepted our protection. All were eventually consumed." Ilara felt her heart pounding. "And you think we might survive where they failed? You calculate differently. Perhaps you will see what we cannot." The next day, Ilara presented her findings to an emergency session of the United Defense Council. "The Nexus isn't offering protection. They're using us as bait or a shield. This Omega Tide isn't a random threat. It's targeting the Nexus specifically." "Even if you're right," the Chinese representative argued, "their technology is centuries beyond ours. We need their defenses. Their defenses have failed 17 times, Ilara countered. "We need something different. Something they wouldn't consider." Dr. Kapoor, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. "The Nexus thinks linearly, maximum efficiency, centralized control. But humans evolved as distributed problem solvers. We thrive on redundancy, diversity, and apparent inefficiency. You're suggesting we reject their protection?" the Russian delegate asked incredulously. "I'm suggesting we accept it," Ilara said, while simultaneously developing our own solution. "We buy time, learn what we can from them, and prepare an alternative approach they wouldn't consider." "What kind of alternative could possibly work against something that destroys advanced civilizations?" the American representative demanded. Ilara smiled. "Something beautifully, irrationally human." When the Nexus delegation returned for Earth's answer, they were greeted with formal acceptance of their protection offer. With certain modifications, Earth requested a phased implementation, with human engineers working alongside Nexus technicians to learn from their advanced allies. Overseer Kavalin seemed momentarily surprised, but quickly calculated the benefits of human cooperation versus potential resistance. "Acceptable. We will begin immediately." As the first Nexus construction ships arrived in Earth orbit, humanity launched the most ambitious secret project in its history. While overtly cooperating with the aliens, Earth's scientists, engineers, and thinkers worked feverishly on what they called Project Dandelion, a completely different approach to facing the coming tide. The Paradigm Shift. 3 months into the Nexus protection program, Overseer Kavalin summoned Ilara to the primary construction platform in Earth orbit. The massive structure was already taking shape, a perfect geometric array of energy collectors and what the Nexus called wave disruptors. "Our sensors have detected unusual launch activities from Earth," the Overseer stated without greeting. Explanation required. Ilara had been prepared for this conversation. "Civilian communications network expansion. We're upgrading our global internet infrastructure to better coordinate with your protection systems." "Unnecessary. Nexus communications will replace your primitive networks once the defense array is complete." "Of course," Ilara nodded respectfully. "But until then, our leaders felt it important to maintain robust communication with Earth's population, to prevent panic and maintain productivity." The alien's head tilted in that now familiar gesture of analysis. "Inefficient, but not disruptive to our timeline." "Continue." What Ilara didn't explain was that those civilian communications satellites were actually the first phase of Project Dandelion, thousands of microsatellites carrying something far more important than communication equipment. Back on Earth, Dr. Kapoor was coordinating with Kirvex, who had surprisingly defected from the Nexus after sharing critical information about the true nature of the Omega Tide. "It's not a natural phenomenon," the alien engineer explained to the assembled human scientists. "It's an emergent response to centralized intelligence that reaches beyond certain computational thresholds." "Like an immune system," one of the physicists suggested. "An imprecise but useful analogy," Kirvex confirmed. "The Nexus believes the tide can be defeated through superior computational power and energy manipulation. They've built increasingly powerful centralized defenses, each one failing as the tide simply adapts. And they're building the same kind of defense here," Dr. Kapoor observed. "Correct. The Nexus cannot conceive of another approach. Efficiency dictates centralization, but centralization is precisely what the tide targets. Project Dandelion took the opposite approach. Instead of a single powerful defense system, Earth was deploying millions of simple, almost primitive devices, each one containing a fragment of human culture, art, music, literature, and science, along with basic replicator technology. These seeds would scatter throughout the solar system and beyond, designed to go dormant when the tide approached rather than confront it. 6 months into the collaboration, the Nexus defense array was nearing completion when their sensors detected the first ripples of the approaching Omega Tide. "It arrives ahead of projections," Overseer Kavalin announced to the Emergency Council meeting. "The defense array requires another 30 days for optimal configuration." "Will it function in its current state?" Ilara asked. "At 70% capacity, sufficient for initial contact, but full power is required for sustained defense." The Overseer activated a holographic display showing the tide's approach. a wavefront of what appeared to be quantum disruption moving through space faster than should be physically possible. We have identified the focal point of the tide's approach, Keyvallen continued. It targets the primary Nexus computational node, as expected. As expected, a Secretary-General echoed. You knew it would target your technology specifically. For the first time, the Overseer seemed hesitant. There are patterns in its behavior. The tide appears to prioritize advanced computational centers, which is why you built your command center in Earth orbit, Ilara said quietly. You're using our planet as a shield. The alien's silence was confirmation enough. Activate Project Dandelion. Ilara ordered through her secure communicator. Immediate deployment. Across Earth, hidden launch facilities activated simultaneously, sending thousands more microsatellites into carefully calculated trajectories. Meanwhile, the millions already in space received their activation codes and began their programmed responses. What is happening? Keyvallen demanded as the Nexus sensors detected the sudden surge of activity. You are interfering with defense protocols. We're implementing our own solution, Ilara explained calmly. One that doesn't involve sacrificing our planet. On view screens around the room, they watched as the human satellites began to change. Instead of maintaining their positions, they dispersed in seemingly random patterns, each one powering down to minimal energy signatures. You are reducing your technological footprint, Curvex observed with what sounded almost like wonder. Making yourselves invisible. Not just ourselves, Dr. Kapoor explained. Watch. The microsatellites nearest to the Nexus defense array began releasing clouds of nanoscale particles, billions of them, each encoded with fragments of human consciousness and creativity. These clouds surrounded the Nexus structures, not attacking them but altering their computational signatures. What have you done? Keyvallen demanded. We've made your technology look less like technology, Ilara explained. Those particles contain randomized patterns of human thought, art, music, dreams, jokes, stories. They introduce just enough chaos into your perfect systems to disrupt the pattern the tide is hunting for. As they watched, the approaching wavefront of the Omega tide seemed to hesitate, its perfectly straight advance developing ripples and eddies as it encountered the cloud of human pattern particles. Impossible, Keyvallen whispered. It's changing course. The tide, which had been heading directly for the main Nexus computational node, began to disperse, breaking into smaller waves that passed through the solar system without cohesion. Where it encountered the powered-down human satellites, it simply flowed around them, apparently not recognizing them as technological threats. Your species introduced inefficiency into perfect defense, Curvex said, something like awe in its synthesized voice. The randomness of your thought patterns. They disrupt the tide's targeting algorithms. The Secretary-General turned to Keyvallen. You said 17 civilizations were destroyed. Did any of them try an approach like ours? No, the Overseer admitted. All accepted our protection model. All implemented centralized defensive arrays. All calculated as the Nexus calculates, Ilara added. But humans have never been good at following the most logical path. We take detours. We write poetry. We create art that serves no survival purpose. We're messy, inefficient, and unpredictable. And that saved you, Keyvallen acknowledged. As the Omega tide dispersed harmlessly into deep space, the Nexus vessels began powering down their defensive arrays. For the first time, the aliens seemed uncertain, their movements less precise. The collective will need to recalculate, Keyvallen finally said. Your approach requires study. We have a counterproposal, Ilara said. Instead of Earth becoming a client species of the Nexus, perhaps the Nexus would consider a genuine alliance with humanity. One where we combine your computational precision with our creative chaos. To what end? To find more solutions the Nexus alone wouldn't calculate. To protect other species from threats like the tide. To explore the galaxy together with complementary perspectives. The alien was silent for a long moment. This proposal has merit, but runs counter to established Nexus protocols for species integration. Maybe those protocols need updating, Ilara suggested. After all, they've failed 17 times. Our approach worked once. That's an infinite improvement, statistically speaking. If the featureless face could have shown emotion, Ilara thought Kevalan might have smiled. A valid calculation. The Nexus will consider your proposal. 1 year later, the first joint human Nexus exploration vessel prepared to depart Earth orbit. Named Calculated Chaos, it contained both the perfect geometry of Nexus engineering and the deliberate asymmetries of human design. Commander Ilarichin stood on the bridge alongside Overseer Kevalan, now designated as co-commander under the new Alliance protocols. The dandelion seeds have been detected in 7 neighboring star systems, Kevalan reported, each one carrying fragments of human culture and basic replication protocols. And the tide. No further activity detected. It appears to have dissipated after failing to locate a suitable target. Ilara nodded, watching as Earth receded on the view screen. The galaxy thought we needed a fleet to survive. They were wrong. We needed to be exactly what we are, the calculators who sometimes ignore the most efficient solution. A strange species, Kevalan observed, that treats its greatest weaknesses as strengths. That's humanity's secret, Ilara smiled. We've survived not despite our flaws, but because of them. As the ship accelerated toward the stars, billions of dandelion seeds continued their silent journey outward, carrying with them the beautiful inefficiency of human thought, the chaos that had saved them when perfect order had failed.